Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar for today. I'm very excited to bring you three of my favourite CEOs in New Zealand, Tony Egan, Pete Conley and Simon Limmer. Look, today is a chat. Now, as always, what I want you to, if you want to ask questions, go into the small question box. If you do have trouble with any of your audio, it is potentially on your PC rather than us. So do try the volume and try checking your speakers are plugged in and your headphones and anything else. And then at worst, I would go to your mobile phone and log in if you have to. We found that there's been good success with that. Now we're gonna rip into it, and we're gonna be talking with our fantastic group of CEOs here. Now, I thought we'd start, just in case there's anyone online listening that might not be familiar with your businesses, did you each just want to go through just a couple of minutes of what you do and what your business is about? So Pete, do you want to start?
Yep, no, that's fine. So ANZCO is a company that was established in 1984, and I won't bore you with the long story of our growth, but today ANZCO employs 3,000 people, largely domiciled in New Zealand. We're a business with a turnover last year of 1.7 billion New Zealand dollars, exporting to 80 countries. We have 7 beef and sheep meat processing plants. We've got 3 manufacturing sites, a cattle feedlot that finishes about 40,000 head of beef a year, and 1 biological protein and serum business. 5 offshore marketing offices with a focus on market-led opportunities from overseas, optimising revenues, balancing customer and market demand with best product options. In terms of ownership, ANZCO today is owned by Itoham Yonagyu Holdings in Japan, who are the 9th largest global meat business, and their revenues are about $11 billion. Their largest shareholder is Mitsubishi Corporation. I guess just a few other little interesting points about ANZCO. We do have a significant investment in manufacturing, which is largely targeted at value-add meat products, both cooked and frozen, and patties, beef jerky. And the real focus there that we've used, rather than to compete on cost, is to differentiate that business through a real core focus on quality. The strength of our shareholder also gives us a lot of know-how in terms of value-add production capability as well. And then just a few other little bits and pieces. We've got offshore offices in Australia, Taiwan, China, Japan, Europe and the UK, and a joint venture business in North America. And we interestingly have a few restaurants too, with 2 in Japan and 1 franchise, 1 in Singapore, and they focus on New Zealand food products, with not only beef and lamb but also seafood. We have New Zealand cheeses, New Zealand wines, and what that does is that allows us to directly promote our product to consumers, but it also enables us, particularly in Japan, to utilise the capability of the restaurant to actually educate our consumers so that they understand our products and how best to use them.
That's awesome, Pete. Sounds like it's a truly global company that's putting a good spotlight on New Zealand produce.
Thanks.
So Tony, do you want to talk us through your fabulousness?
Yeah, thanks, Julia, and hi everyone. Feeling a little bit small listening to those two. Perhaps I should work on the premise that between 2 giants there's room for a person to stand tall. We're a family business, and we're located in the Waikato with 2 meat plants. With a small acquisition this week, we'll be about 500 and something people in our business. Been going 27 or 8 years, and I'm very much the black sheep of the family. It's owned by the Egan family. I went off to AFCO for about 6 years and Shore Quality for 5, and now I'm back doing my time again. So I've been in the game about 20 years here at Greenley. We produce beef products, have about 1,200 products, go to about 45 countries, and we spend all day trying to outsmart these other 2 fine gentlemen.
and you sell online. So if I'm a New Zealander, I can log in and into your Greenie Butcher and buy meat.
You can indeed, yes, and it's going great guns ever since COVID-19 hit.
Tip of the hat to COVID for that one.
Well, there's nothing like a good crisis to change your business model. You know, I was thinking about it back in Roman times. They all got marble busts made, and in medieval times they got paintings by the masters done. So there's always marketing associated with a crisis. But this more recent one is now a virtual crisis, and it's interesting to see how everyone's responding. You know, you got all these people sitting around on webinars and Zoom meetings, and you wonder whether they're fully clothed from the waist down. I think you just admitted you had gumboots on, Julia.
Gumboot socks, yep, sure am. I'm only business on the top half.
Simon Limmer insists on being 2 meters from his computer screen. I'm not sure why that is, but it's the previous tradition of marble busts and paintings by the masters is anything to go by. It seems to be that these sorts of crises have a correlation between people lying around with body parts hanging out. So perhaps he's up to all sorts of hijinks that that badger has.
Now, Simon, can you match that wonderful wit and storytelling?
I guess I get the last word in the introduction piece, so I get to have a go back. I mean, I think if you're spending your whole day wondering how to outsmart Pete and I, Tony, I'd suggest that's probably about 7.5 hours wasted, because it shouldn't take that much effort. But and the other thing I'd say is if being small is a problem for you, I'd say that in our industry, the economy of scale that you think Silver Fern Farms might have isn't always an advantage. And Pete, just a word on your restaurant. The food was fine. The clientele was a little bit average the night I was there, but fine product, and good to see all of those good New Zealand products on display in Tokyo. Julia, from a Silver Fern Farms perspective, I won't go into the 72 years of history. It's long and it's quite checkered, and most people on the call will have some sense of it one way or another. And everyone I meet seems to have quite a polarised view as to how Silver Fern Farms came into being, and you know, and what that has meant. I think we've now been a brand for long enough for Silver Fern Farms to kind of carry its own future rather than being a representative of the history that we are. But I guess we've evolved to a point to today where we're 14 plants from Dargaville down to Invercargill, all species, so beef, lamb and venison, around 7,000 staff, all of whom we've managed to keep on board over the last couple of months, something that we're quite proud of. And we're selling into about 60 countries around the world also. So from a shareholder perspective, we're a little bit unique in that we are half cooperatively owned. So Silver Fern Farms Cooperative owns 50% of Silver Fern Farms Limited, and we're half Chinese owned, as Shanghai Mailing brought into the business about 3 years ago now. So Shanghai Mailing, which is a subsidiary of Bright Food, the second biggest Chinese state-owned food distributor in China. So that's an interesting little dynamic for us to navigate in terms of the interests of those two shareholders. But my view is if we can balance the needs of farmers and, you know, New Zealand landowners who have been invested for such a long time, if we can balance the needs of a market such as China, which for most of us is one of the sort of 2 or 3 priority markets that we're selling into, we're probably getting it about right. So whilst on a day-to-day basis it's quite hard work just keeping those two interest groups happy, longer term I think it serves us quite well to have that tension around our board table. So a little bit like these two guys as well, Pete and Conley, we are very much focused on turning our attention more and more actively towards the market, not being a supply-driven business, which I think typically the milk industry has potentially suffered from for a number of years, but really trying to understand much more deeply what our markets are looking for, what our customers are needing from us, and ultimately trying to build a connection with consumers around the place who will place a premium value on our New Zealand grass-fed red meat, which we believe is a very, very strong opportunity for us. So I'll stop there, Julia, by way of introduction.
Look, that leads really nicely into the next question is, you know, what do the three of you see as New Zealand's, I guess, advantage in the marketplace? What do you see as our core? Oh, we've had Simon pop off. I'm sure he'll pop back on in a minute. You know, our key advantage is our meat out in the markets. What is it? What do you see New Zealand's real value is?
Who's going to have a crack here? Tony, you or me?
Well, you go first, Pete, and I'll follow.
I think for a long time we've been very much seen as a business that's built around commodities, and that is wrong. And the opportunity actually lies with, you know, the products that we have, and really the scale of what we are in a global sense. And let's be honest, in terms of our beef and lamb sector, somewhere between 80 and 90% of what we produce is destined to go overseas. So we are very reliant on that offshore market, and in the scale of things when it comes to beef, we're very small. So therein lies our advantage. How do we play in that space? How do we do more with what we have? And that's around the stories we can tell, the fact that our product can be grass-fed, it can meet some real key customer attributes around antibiotic-free, hormone-free, and stories like that. What we need to do is tell that story better. In terms of our lamb, yes, we're a much bigger player when you look at the global scale because it's a much more niche product. But again, it's playing in the same space. And then beyond that is, for me anyway, is, you know, how do we drive more revenue out of what we have? Because anyone that's closely in touch with the red meat sector understands that our beef and lamb herd and flock aren't growing. And so we've got to work out ways in terms of how we do more with what we have. So be it into healthcare products or co-products, all very challenging, very easy to talk about, but all very challenging in terms of how we execute that. But you know, those are the key things for me anyway.
Cool. Welcome back, Simon. We're just talking about New Zealand's competitive advantage as a red meat industry. So, Tony.
Well, interesting to listen to what Pete's saying, and I think the COVID-19 situation has taught me a thing or two about bubbles. 6 months ago, I thought there was something you drank. Now there's something you live in. And in my case, I happen to be living in a bubble with 3.5 vegetarians, which was quite an educating experience. We had one of my daughters who's concerned about the welfare of animals, and so she didn't want to eat meat. We had another who was concerned about the welfare of the environment. She didn't want to eat meat, and we had one who didn't like it because it made him feel a bit funny with his tummy, and my wife is flexitarian at best. So what it showed me was there's a range of perspectives, and some of them are millennials coming through, intergenerational change. Turn on TV to watch what COVID is doing around the world, and you see this Spanish woman with a banner out her window saying husband for sale, and that taught me a bit about direct marketing. But it also showed me that there's much more direct communication through social media and the media in general now than we've had in the past. So taking those learnings, I guess you could say that we have to focus on what is unique about New Zealand, what attributes are different to other countries, and we have to allow for a changing consumer, a consumer who's more discerning, not just about what they're eating, but what it's doing to the planet, what it's doing to themselves, what it's doing to the animals that are involved. These are questions that 20 years ago, when I first started selling meat, weren't even raised for consideration in a transaction. But these days, as Pete said, attributes like hormone-free, antibiotic-free, pasture-fed, label claims around the attributes of our products are becoming much more important. And in addition to that, our position as a grass-fed, isolated country with a great disease status in many respects has a lot of selling properties on the global stage. So I think the proposition is changing, and the premium is coming with that changing proposition.
Awesome. So I guess, what I've heard from yourself and Pete as capturing the existing value we've got. I think we get so obsessed, don't we, that we have to do something new, and we do need to adapt, but I think we've actually got the value there, and we do focus on a lot of these things that you mentioned, Tony, and I guess it's how do we capture that and make sure we actually get value for it.
And I think with online sales particularly, you know, we had a predisposition to a certain demographic, being a sort of a 35-year-old wealthy female as our target audience. Well, we've discovered that there are segments within a market such as 55 plus people who don't want to go out to buy products anymore, and people with a halal and desire for a particular attribute like halal processing and want to get it delivered to their home. So there are segments within markets that are much more specific than we'd realised before we got into this COVID situation as well.
Awesome. And Simon, what are your thoughts on competitive advantage?
Look, I think the guys have touched on it. I'd just probably add, I think the integrity out of New Zealand is something that we pride ourselves on, and I think it gets reinforced in spades when you look at New Zealand's response to COVID to date. I think the world is observing that, and food safety, food security, those fundamentals which most economies take for granted, but not all of them, will serve us well again. So our ability to demonstrate real integrity in our food production systems. In addition, all of those other attributes we're talking around, the sustainable production systems that we have, the natural eating qualities, the nutritional qualities, all of the avoidance of antibiotics and hormones and what have you that people are talking about. Again, this is not just a red meat story, it's a New Zealand Inc. story, and so our ability to really leverage that again, connect and become even more relevant than we have in the past with customers and consumers around the world, because the story is all there. I think in the red meat industry, and I'm relatively recent to it, but my sense is that we haven't told our story loudly enough. We've been guilty of being sort of focused back on what was happening in New Zealand and not conscious of what we were potentially shoveling off into the markets, into a sea of red meat, which we haven't differentiated actively enough. And so I know that we've come a long, long way over the last decade or so, but just the opportunity again to step up, be very selective as to which consumers we are targeting. We are a very small percentage of the world's red meat production, and we only need to be connecting with those people who get it. Because we know there's noise from plants, we know there's noise from so many other different angles, and so trying to be relevant in a broad sense is a massive challenge for us. We've just got to be very targeted as to who we're connecting with and why, because they're out there and they want what we have to offer.
Yeah, I mean, we've actually had a bit of a follow-up question, which I think is quite a good one. You know, I guess from my perspective, I think our processors have done a brilliant job through COVID. And do you think that's going to become a bit of a competitive advantage to your customers of how you've dealt with COVID, how you've worked through it? Any thoughts on that? Any of you?
Yeah. Maybe I'll keep going. Well, I've got the floor and then I'll pass back. But look, I mean, I think there's a real story in what's going on in North America at the moment. On the one hand, North American meat processors have been absolutely decimated by COVID in their plants and their ability to keep operating. On the other hand, in New Zealand, we've responded collectively very, very well. And we're reaping the benefits because we're selling into that market because there's a shortage of product up there, not only because from a volume perspective, but also from an attribute perspective. So there's just a very direct example of our ability to be responsive and responsible compared with what's happened up there is it's just a clear example of how that is paying dividends for us.
Awesome. Tony.
Yeah. Well, I just add to that. I think the government did a tremendous job shutting down when it did. You know, at the time we were all, well, the week or two prior to that, we were quite cynical about a full shutdown, level 4 even being achievable. But to see the way the country got behind the government to do that gave us as an industry quite a lot of inspiration. We went in early with a protocol through the Meat Industry Association where we endorsed a 2-metre standard, and we all deliberately slowed our plants down and separated shifts and did all sorts of other procedural things to create safety for our workforce. And since then, we've seen absolute carnage in the meat plants of North America and in Europe as well, where, you know, people are highly infected and their production is highly compromised. So I think the response to COVID from a collective meat industry point of view showed that we are capable of working as a team, showed that we respect each other, and that we, don't get me wrong, we argued like cats and dogs to get to where we got to, didn't we, Simon? But we all agreed in the end on a single protocol for us all, and we then set about doing it with religious integrity. So I think that demonstrates that this industry has moved on from the past where we said one thing and did another. We are actually true to our word.
Cool. Pete, anything?
Look, I think these guys have put it very well. I do think off the back of all of this, there is an opportunity for New Zealand internationally. I lived overseas for 5 years. I've got a lot of friends in North America. We've had a lot of coverage in that market as a country. There's an awareness of New Zealand now. I've had feedback out of Japan again, you know, in terms of on a global stage, we're in the spotlight as a country, and as a country, we're seen in extremely positive light, to the point that I know that, you know, the reporting in markets like Japan's gone beyond just the way we've handled COVID, and has even gone into scenery and tourism and food products as well. So there's an opportunity to leverage it. But back to the points that both Simon and Tony made, it was, you know, New Zealand did an incredible job as a country and as an industry in terms of firstly making the decision, and then how we actually set up to operate, and then the opportunities that have come beyond that. And if you just want to look at the other side of that equation, just have a look online at what's happened to some of the US plants where they're, and I guess, you know, we can all look at it politically in terms of how they've handled it in the States. You know, that's flowed straight on in terms of the seriousness that their industry's taken, and that again has created a multitude of opportunities for New Zealand companies. It's probably elevated some conversations around the healthiness and the safety of our product as well.
Yeah. I mean, I've got to admit, I don't think the reality hit until you heard of plants being shut down in the States because of, you know, they're pretty much 50% of their workforce were infected. And I think sometimes it takes these things for us to realise what we have and the value we have. And it's actually heartening, Tony, to hear that you say that you did have arguments, because at the end of the day, it's, you know, getting to a good decision often comes through challenging diverse perspectives. And that means that there will be challenge and there will be arguments as such, and we won't agree on everything, but it sounds to me like you worked towards something that was the best purpose for New Zealand, or what the best outcome for a total industry would be versus what individual organisations were looking for. And so, yeah, I'm very grateful of that. It makes me feel very proud.
And I guess that was a bit like a caucus meeting too, wasn't it, Tony? Once we had the debate, we all fell into line.
We did, yeah. And look, I think it's partly the situation with COVID, but if you look at the trend in the meat industry over the last year or two, with strong leadership coming through, with a range of challenges, it's probably fair to say we've sailed close to the wind, close to the wind all season in many respects. You know, we've weathered the storm, because if you go back to the start of this meat season, if you quote George Orwell, who wrote Animal Farm, whatever goes on four legs and has wings is a friend, you'd probably say that's not true, because we've had swine fever, which created havoc in many of our markets, and particularly in protein in China, which led to repricing. And then you had the plague of COVID, which has created all sorts of disruption. We've had one thing after another, and we've dealt with it at an industry level in a very mature way. We've worked to help each other in market, and we've come up with initiatives like Taste Pure Nature and other things through Beef and Lamb, which I think are helping to show not only leadership but clear pathways to solve problems.
Awesome.
Yeah,
and that pretty much sorry, you go, Simon.
I'll just add, because I am relatively recent still to the industry, and a couple of people sort of raised their eyebrows when they heard what my next move was going to be, and sort of said, boy, you're walking into a fist fight. And I've got to say that my experience has been something quite different. There are forums for us to be talking, as the guys are describing. Those conversations are constructive, and I think there is a degree of trust and integrity sitting around that table, which I can't comment, but potentially that didn't exist before, but it certainly exists today. And I think we take the opportunity as often as possible to sit down and have a chat and have a beer and talk about the issues that we have in common, because we are too small to fight it out back in New Zealand when the real battle is out in those global markets, and we all have a similar set of challenges and a significant opportunity to make change. So I just get that sense that really we are so aligned in terms of our thinking and what we could be doing. That doesn't mean that we're not going to compete in those areas that we absolutely need to and do. And the conversations are frank and honest, but really constructive. And I just think there's so much more opportunity for us to keep moving forward with that dialogue. So it's a good place to be.
Look, and I guess from my perspective, I've had the luxury of chatting with all three of you quite regularly, or emailing you, and you're super approachable. I see how the dynamic you have together, and I said it before this, is I really wish everyone else could see it and see you in the way that I get to see you, because it gives me a great deal of faith for the future of our red meat sector. Because as you say, numbers, I mean, I might get this wrong, but I think world consumption's estimated at about 315 million tonne, and we export just over 1 million tonne. So the perspective of size is there's actually plenty of space for all of you, and the more you have that co-opetition, where of course you're going to have competition, because that keeps the blood running and it keeps us strong and succeeding, but that doesn't mean that you can't still work together in market, I guess, to promote the wider New Zealand benefit.
Yes, so to complete my George Orwell quote, whatever goes on two legs as an enemy is also wrong. We've proved you can get on with each other in the meat industry. And I think it's testament to not only leadership, but it's also, in my view, going to create a really solid platform for the future where we need to work more collaboratively. And I think it's going to start happening in greater ways than we've ever seen before.
Absolutely. And I think that runs across subsector, doesn't it? That the collaboration is, at the end of the day, you get beef cows because they come out of a dairy cow, and we get dairy because the cow has a calf, and we've got the arable sector that provide feed, and we've got the horticulture sector as well, that there's some of the waste product goes into feed, and lots of, I guess, synergy and interaction, but collaboration can go beyond just you all and into wider sectors.
Well, I think we're realising that the world and its problems are bigger than any of us, whether it's water quality or environment in general, or climate, or the wave of millennials that are growing through into our population and taking over the world. We can't solve these problems unless we work as a team.
Yeah. Now, one question that's come through is, have you had to change the product offering due to the current global market challenges? Who wants to take that one?
It's an extremely good question. When you dismantle a lamb and when you dismantle a beef animal, you generally end up with a range of products, all which go to different homes. So, what we have seen is we've seen the demise or the rapid decline globally in what we would call food service business. So business that would ultimately end up in the likes of a restaurant. They've been very, very hard hit. And we've seen the flip side of that being the demand that's come from retail. Now, in many instances, they can be quite different propositions when it comes to product and product mix. So, and the other piece to that is, customers that we work with globally that may have a stronger channel with regards to online or digital. So So yes, we've seen it, but we've had to manage our way around it because, as I say, you know, at the end of the day, when you commit to purchasing livestock and processing them, you're going to end up with a range of products from, in the case of beef, mincemeat for hamburgers or lasagnas, up to a fillet steak, which would normally be eaten on a cruise ship or in a fine dining restaurant somewhere. So we've had to find ways to do that. And yeah, I guess up to the other guys to add some more.
Any thoughts, Tony or Simon?
Well, just adding to that, during this COVID-19 situation, we've had a 267% increase in sales through our online butcher shop, which probably isn't that surprising because people buying to get delivered home products. But what's interested me, because I was seconded to help pack, which demonstrates a couple of things. One, that when you're a managing director, you rise to your level of incompetence, and I'm not particularly good at packing orders. And the other was just how many products we were selling. You know, we got up to 29 different products in any given order or on offer in any given day. And the types of products that people are buying now are much more adventuresome than they used to be. You know, we used to build our business around, as Pete said, hamburgers and steak cuts. Now we're talking about a whole range of secondary cuts, muscles, muscle groups, and consumers are starting to understand the difference between them. You know, a rump is no longer a rump, it's a rump and a rump cap. You know, ossobuco, various offal products, and the celebrity chefs of this world, and the emergence of barbecue clubs and all the rest of it have changed the way we view food. And you've only got to look overseas to see that meat's no longer centre of the plate in many countries. It's a component of a meal where people have a certain amount to spend and want meat to be in it. But you know, many people are flexitarians now, and they don't want to eat a huge piece of meat. So we have to adapt, and we have to understand these consumer preferences and start channeling our products accordingly, because we're not going to get the same value out of steak cuts as we got in the past, and we're going to have to get that value somewhere else. And I think we can do it through attributes and through a better understanding of what consumers want to buy.
Awesome.
Yeah, look, I don't have a lot to add, but I think just that last statement that Tony made, the biggest challenge I feel as though we have is getting close enough to our customers, which is a real challenge for us given how broadly we sell around the world into so many different cultures. And typically we've done it from back here in New Zealand. You know, little by little, I think we're stepping into the markets, and I know these guys are doing the same thing, but we are putting people on the ground and trying to work more in collaboration or partnership with our customers in market, because this ability to actually understand and change, be agile enough to be relevant is really key. And if you think about food service at the moment, who knows how long it is, but if you put yourself in the shoes of a restaurant owner in any country around the world at the moment, they will be desperate to work out as to how they maintain social distancing, create confidence to their patrons that they can come and eat safely in their restaurants. But more than that, their margins will have been squeezed. They'll be looking for cheaper alternatives. They'll be looking anything they can to survive, as well as attracting people back into their restaurants. So they're going to be adapting, they're going to be changing, and the way that we sold to them 12 months ago is likely to be very different as to how we're going to be selling to them going forward. And similarly, if you think about retail, bricks and mortar has changed forever, and you know, just some information that we're sort of basing our thinking on is that 20% of retail stores will no longer be for you know, people, walk-in shoppers. It will be dedicated to the e-commerce channels. So they are adapting, but they will be dreaming also, if they think they can just pivot away from bricks and mortar retail and into e-commerce. There is a whole new discipline and set of expertise around bringing people to online platforms, and then the supply chain ramifications of actually getting the product through to the consumer. So again, our ability to understand that, work with our customers, modify, adapt our products, our packaging, our supply chains to respond to that. Our success is going to come down to that understanding and that agility to respond. And we won't do it successfully out of New Zealand, in my mind, because we're just too far in the lag in terms of our ability to do that is just too great. Someone will step in between us, and we're either leaving value on the table or we're just not relevant anymore. So, you know, agility is going to be really key.
I think that kind of, oh, sorry, Pete, you go.
So I was just going to back that comment from Simon, and you know, our distance from market is a real challenge for us, and our ability to respond to customers. You know, a retail customer could respond overnight, and our ability to service that response from here, particularly when you don't have planes in the air, becomes increasingly difficult. So, you know, I think one thing, you know, I think the points come through here. Changes happen very quickly under COVID. We've had to change. We rapidly had to configure processing sites to something a week earlier we'd never imagined. If I use our restaurant business, we had to pivot really quickly. So, you know, in Japan, state of emergency was declared. We had to close the restaurant, and we had to immediately pivot in terms of, okay, how are we going to operate? Home delivery was one, online sales. So, you know, some of these things that we'd never dreamed of being able to do and turn around within a week are being done. And we're seeing that with our customers as well. So retailers boosting up online, restaurants globally across the UK and Europe immediately moving in terms of tapping into that online or that click and collect concept.
Awesome. So, I mean, I guess it leads in greatly to a question I got a bit earlier on was, what is needed to ensure that New Zealand red meat sector remains resilient to future uncontrollable global market changes? I mean, I guess in reality, right, COVID's not the first crisis we've seen, and it certainly won't be the last.
I think the answer to that partly starts here in New Zealand, and it starts with climate change, and it starts with what we've seen this past season with drought for farmers. In a perfect world, a farmer would grow the perfect animal at the perfect time for us to make the perfect product. And the reality is we can't achieve that. So we've got to make the most of the situation we're in. And every season is different for the meat industry. This past season, we've seen farmers, you know, really hard hit by drought. And although we've had swine fever and we've had COVID-19, underlying all of that has been a desperate situation for many, and those stock have all come at a certain time. We've all struggled to process them with waiting lists. So part of the question is, how does the industry retain the flexibility to service its supplier and to provide incentives for that supplier to hold stock and to finish them as best they can? But at the same time, how do we remain robust enough to take the stock when they're needed to be taken and turn them into valuable products that keep that farmer farming even in the tough years? So our focus is much back down the value chain to where the product's been produced. And I think gone are the days of the Sunday night ring round where farmers used to play meat companies off. I think there's a lot more belief in value chains and trust. And, you know, these two people that are with me on this panel today will tell you none of us are particularly chasing volume like we used to. We're chasing value, and sure, we need a certain volume or scale to be viable, but we're not doing it at any cost anymore. We're doing it as part of our business to achieve value for the farmers supplying us. And that club concept we've talked about is something we're trying to create in our value chain. And I think the bigger companies can do that more successfully in market because they've got the volume to do it. Where we can't do it, we team up and work on projects together. So whether it's at the farmer end or at the market end, there's new and collaborative ways of doing things.
Anything you guys want to add to?
Yeah, I'll go. I couldn't agree more with Tony. I think you know, the farmers on the call are potentially listening to this and thinking, oh my goodness, you know, they're focused on the markets. We're not going to see the tension between the meat companies, and that's going to flow through into a lower schedule price. That's not what we're saying at all. What we're saying is that we've got to get the balance right, investing in the markets, making sure that we've got that market-led proposition clearly in front of our suppliers to respond to, and not the other way around, because that's the best way we can serve our suppliers for the longer term, by ensuring that the knowledge and the understanding of what the customers are after and the commercial mechanisms to reward good behaviour are very, very transparent. And I think we're all saying the same thing, that we've got to move away from a supply-driven industry and one that's very much based on the Sunday ring around, as Tony describes. And look, there are some amazing progressive quality suppliers out there who want to be more closely connected with the markets and want to be rewarded on a more risk-reward shared basis. And we see that coming all the time. Our responsibility, any exporter in New Zealand, in my view, their responsibility is to bring the people that hold the biggest risk are the consumer who pays for the product and the landowner who produces it. And the closer we can get those two together, the more successful we will be.
Hey, Pete, did you want to add anything in there?
Oh, look, yeah, I'll just be repeating these other two, but building those integrated supply chains, building that loyalty and alignment across them, all the way, from the farmer producer up to the end customer and back down, and I think it's been well explained here.
Cool. So, look, we've got a couple of price questions, which we'll leave to the end. So just start thinking about, we'd like you to get your crystal ball out and give us some price predictions. But I guess one of the things is, trade excess is a big topic right now, and there's a lot of protectionism. So we've got one question here. Trade excess is increasingly becoming a flashpoint in global politics, with the world becoming more domestic focused and more protectionist. What are we doing to maintain access, and are we at risk of becoming too heavily reliant on China given our FTA?
Which one of you works for MFAT? The environment is probably, in all of my time in the export business, we're in an environment currently where protectionism is on the rise, and it's getting worse. And without going into the ins and outs of various different market-to-market situations, yes, it's definitely something we've got. And off the back of it, we do have, as the country in New Zealand, we've got some complexities to deal with relative to the likes of what's happening to us around Brexit, etc. So it's a particularly difficult situation. It is a situation that all of us need to understand is a slow and measured gain, and we obviously rely on political relations from a government to government level to help us manage our way through it. I think New Zealand, again, back to when we were talking earlier about our size and our reliance on overseas, we are small. We are a peaceful nation. We generally don't get into scraps with people. I think all of that's a good thing. So, yeah, I think the best strategy is to try and fly under the radar of this one as best we possibly can. To the point on China, I do get the concern that people have. The reality of business is that, in what we do, is that ultimately over time, obviously that market demands and signals and economics will determine where product goes. And yes, that's driven the rise in China in terms of demand for our beef and lamb. But that's also been driven by an emerging middle class, and a middle class that's adventurous and looking for new products and products with a story. And yeah, China, I think in terms of some of the growth numbers that were projected last year, just to give people some form of scale, just in terms of beef demand growth from China on an annual basis, my calculation was that every 3 years, China would need 2 New Zealand beef supplies just to keep up with that demand growth. So, look, ultimately, supply and demand and global market pricing will determine that. But for all of us, that's something we've got to work our way through. As a company, and I think these other two gentlemen here as well, we take an approach whereby we continue to support a whole basket of markets, and that's really got to be our strategy, that we try and make sure that we don't we all have levels within where we want to measure our business, that we're not overly reliant on any one market, because when you do get a shock, it can really knock you around.
Yeah. Any Simon or Tony, do you want to add to that at all?
Well, Julia, I thought you gave a great example of protectionism when you put a electric fence in front of your front door to graze the back lawn. We're just wondering why the countdown delivery man was seen running down the driveway.
And Fry, look, it was for the horses grazing on the lawn. I wasn't trying to keep people out. I can't afford to keep people out.
I thought you might be trying to keep someone in, Julia.
Yeah, I know, I should have an electric fence channeling them to my house.
To use the analogy, I think it's as Pete said, it's about getting the balance right. We don't want to upset our trading partners, but we also want to represent the integrity New Zealand has to offer. We have products that are great products. We want to maximise their chilled potential and their market access potential, and do it in the context of some natural market tension, so that we can maximise value. And we are probably too reliant on China in many respects, but it's important to us to be reliant, because they give us great premiums. And there are many markets within one market as well, and not just one China market to us. There's north and south and east and west and all the places in between. So it's very easy to generalise. My view would be sail close to the wind, but make the most of the opportunities, and particularly the opportunities in Asia, which are in our own backyard, because unlike a lot of the world, which is moving to a flexitarian mindset, China is still catching up on its protein deficit, and so is much of Southeast Asia. So we can take advantage of that, and we can make a lot of money for New Zealanders in the process.
Awesome, thank you. Simon?
You probably don't need me to add anything, Julia, but just the one comment that captures my attention is that having optionality and strong demand is really important for us. We continue to trade globally, and things do happen along the way, and you're only as good as your next best market, basically. So strong in-market demand, strong customer relationships, strong connections with consumers, strong relationships in general behind the border in these countries that we're operating in, particularly China, serves us well, because that gives us influence on that side of the border just as much as it does from a New Zealand perspective. I guess the nervous thing for us is just that New Zealand continues its ability to navigate the middle ground, and the politicizing of some of these relationships is very, very, very scary. We are reliant on a couple of very big markets, being the USA and China, and these guys are too. And the politicizing of those relationships is something that would be unforgivable.
Yep.
I could just add one further observation that COVID-19's given us as a company, and that is that the culture of the country you're dealing with becomes more prominent when you're in a situation like this. In China's case, there's a tradition where companies that have benefited during the good times give back during the tough times. And I'm on the board of Dairy Goat Co-op as well, and I saw them doing that with their biggest customer up there in terms of donating some milk powder. And we started talking to our customer in Shanghai and said, is there something we can do within the community to demonstrate a willingness to give back? And it went down extremely well. And I'm not saying that to make us look good, but I'm saying it because I think part of dealing with countries like China is having a better understanding of not just their market pricing and their packaging and their requirements for food, but also the general cultural mandates that come with commerce in their own country, and trying to adapt to that and trying to show some demonstrated effort to be more like them in the way they do their business, because they're great people and they're great culture, but there are things we can learn all the time from it.
We can't expect either that everything stays the same in their world, so we've got to keep learning, because they're very, Asia, in my experience, moves very fast and adapts very quickly, and what we knew yesterday might not apply tomorrow. So I guess it's about consistently learning as well, Tony.
Yes.
Now,
that's great.
I have got another question here around, is there any value being lost from the market by us not marketing our New Zealand food sourced as whole, rather than just individual going into fruits or meat or dairy? What are your thoughts on us, I guess, collaboratively marketing and market?
Well, we do collaborate now. We learn from other companies, whether it's logistics, getting product to markets, whether it's packaging. We've been studying Zespri for years in terms of some of the smart stuff they've been doing and learning from them. We've also studied the dairy industry, and some of our stainless steel is becoming near stainless steel problem. And we've learned up and down the value chain from other industries. And I think the reason our industry's got to where it is now through blood, sweat and tears is because the leaders of our industry currently understand the mistakes that have been made and understand what's been clever in other industries. Look at Simon Limmer, who's come from the kiwi fruit industry and brought a whole lot of that understanding with him. And, I'm learning from him as much as I am from anyone else, because every time he opens his mouth, he says something intelligent. So, I think it's about being open to new ideas.
My confidence in the red meat industry has just gone down several notches, I have to say. Thank you, Tony. You're a good man, and we'll have that beer tomorrow night.
We're talking about having a summit actually at one of our batches, which could be quite messy.
Oh man.
But you're gonna have to wear your gumboots.
Hey, that's no problem. Pete, have you got anything you wanted to add in there?
Look, I was back to the point, just to reiterate that we are working together where we see market opportunities to collaborate. Both Simon and I, and along with Alliance, are involved with the lamb company in North America, and that has led to, and that is very much a branded and market-led business, and it is focused on really getting the most out of that market collaboratively, utilising the combined strength of the product that we can bring to the table, and the investment that's been made actually in the capability in market to process meat all the way through to a retail ready form. So, I think that's a living example, and the lamb company doesn't just mean lamb. So we, again, as the three Kiwi shareholders, are working together to work out, how do we brand and market New Zealand beef in North America? How do we tell the stories that the customers there are looking for, that story back to healthiness, safe food production, ticking the right boxes around product claims, be they antibiotic-free, hormone-free, etc. So, I think that is happening, and that will continue to happen. First and foremost, for that to happen, you need like-minded individuals working collaboratively. And the point I'd like to add to the audience to that today, you've got 3 of us here, but I can guarantee if you had 10 meat company executives on this call today, we would be singing from the same song sheet. So, I feel very confident about the industry and the sector and the way we're working together. And these are the true areas that we need to work around in terms of that market access point that come through today, the story we tell, the opportunities in market, because collectively we're much stronger. And the enemy's not here in New Zealand. The enemy is the other producers globally, and we can all work together to actually do something good here.
Awesome. Simon, anything you wanted to add in there?
Yeah, one really last quick comment. If there's any country in the world which is conducive to collaboration, it's New Zealand. We know each other. We have a collective belief and understanding of how important it is to trade and export because of our place in the world. And I just feel as though we know each other well enough across, certainly I endorse what Pete says, within the meat industry, we know each other, we trust each other, and I think there is a real if the opportunities are sensible, if they're commercially oriented, they will come to the fore because the relationships exist. And I think that's probably as far as we need to go in that conversation. If it's sensible, if it's commercially going to be beneficial, we will find a solution because we trust each other, we know each other. Forums like Te Hono and others bring us together, and we pick up the phone and talk to each other all the time. So it will happen if it's meant to happen.
Yeah, and I think from a wider perspective too, I look at it where I think in New Zealand we get diversity wrong sometimes, and diversity is actually about thinking differently. And you know, I've had the luxury of sitting down with each of you, and I know that you all think really differently. And so to me, there is good diversity coming through in a good way, Simon. There's good diversity coming through the sector because you are different and you're not afraid to speak your mind. And I don't think collaboration means that we all love each other all the time. I think collaboration is actually that we have the courage to step up and have conversations that are difficult, that might, you know, really frustrate another person, but ultimately land on an outcome or an objective that is good for New Zealand or good for your industry. And I'm not trying to blow hot air up your bums here, because I know that you guys hate that stuff, but I've probably been one that's pushed back on the industry for years, saying that people didn't get on, and it's changed, and it's something that I think New Zealand should be proud of. And, you know, I want to sort of shout out to Beef and Lamb as well, because, you know, if we didn't have a good industry body that was able to bring you all together, this makes a big difference as well, and they've got a pretty cool team doing stuff there as well.
And if I could just add, Julia, it's great to see meat companies making profits. You got Pete announced a good profit recently, and Simon before that. And I think it's testament to the fact that we are now mature enough to make a profit rather than just simply blow it on procurement, and we're mature enough to invest it in the value chain. And the first thing we're all doing, you know, we're not getting rich quick, but we are making profits, which we are investing back in the value chain. And I think that's really exciting, because it's going to get more sophisticated and it's going to create more opportunities for all of us.
Yep, and you put it back in the community. I think, is it 20 tonne that you've given, Tony, to a local charity? Simon, thank you so much for supporting Meet the Need. I'm a director on that, and you know, Wayne and Siobhan are incredible humans who have made a great organisation, and if it wasn't for Silverfern Farms, that wouldn't be possible. You know, Pete, I'm sure you guys are doing stuff. You're just a very humble, lovely company that don't tell anyone what you do.
We keep our head down. We've been supporting all of the food banks in the communities that we have, you know, a representation in, and we've also been, you know, one thing we moved on early with was we purchased a lot of PPE. That we thought we might need that we didn't. So what we've been doing is donating that into, you know, community providers who need to go in and support people in the community with needs in terms of helping make sure that they stay healthy as well. So that's what we've been up to in recent times.
Oh.
Pete even donated me some head detectors, so
yep.
It's obvious that he's doing better than us.
Yeah.
Hey, look, just I know I'm taking lots of your time, and I actually have a million questions I haven't been able to ask, but I'll send them through to you guys anyway. But I guess I have had a couple of questions around pricing. Have we got any our crystal balls on the desk, and what do we think is going to happen in the future with meat pricing?
I'll go first here, Julia, if you like. Look, we've got to put exchange rate to one side at the moment, because, you know, if you just look at the US dollar over the last 2 months, we've seen a 10% swing, and, you know, for our beef business and our export beef business, that's the driver to a lot of what we do. I think, you know, we've got to be cautious, we've got to be nimble, we've got to respond quickly at the moment. One thing we are seeing is volatility, and volatility's increased, so that makes it hard. But my personal view is, without putting you know, numbers out there, look, I just get the sense that the market, you know, the markets for beef and lamb will be steady to firm over the remainder of the year. There's going to be some bumps in the road, there's going to be some ups and the downs, but the fundamentals to me, if I look out in terms of the way our markets are, you know, we do have a diverse range of markets that we can go to. What's happening in Australia on beef supply? They've gone through a major drought. They're a big competitor to New Zealand. They're going to be short of red meat. And, you know, the rise in emerging markets for protein demand, I think that all underpins a positive outlook for the red meat sector.
Cool. So prices up?
I think I said steady to firm.
Oh, sorry,
yeah,
right.
Yeah. Yeah, and there'll be prices being up. There's always going to be a seasonal element to it as well.
Cool.
So, you know, supply and demand as well. But look, I'm I'm certainly not sitting here at the moment concerned that we're going to see an erosion in prices, put it that way.
Cool. Tony, Simon, thoughts?
I'm happy to add a thought while you have a think, Si. Look, we've seen with COVID-19 the total dismantling of the white tablecloth restaurant in terms of aspirations for high-end marketing, and what it's given us, I think, is a cautionary tale, and that is that you need to have a spread within your product mix of markets and segments within markets, and that you can make good money at retail, you can make good money even in a wet market or on online sales. So don't be ashamed of it. You know, focus on where you extract value, and if it's using attributes to enhance that value further, do it, because that's where we as a country, that's the composition of our kill is coming from. And I think those of us that are in beef are fortunate at the moment because our product is probably more open to those other uses than perhaps venison or lamb, which has traditionally been at the higher end of the market. So, you know, there are some inherent advantages with the species you're in, but understanding the segments that we target, the changing demographic we're servicing, and selling the story collectively of New Zealand, I think is the answer. And if we can do that well and maintain our environmental focus, I think we're on a winner. Certainly, we're much better off than the feedlot systems overseas, and we're much better off in the way we market our products than many of our competitors.
Absolutely. Simon?
Yeah, well, I will continue the trend of optimism, maybe with one caveat. I do believe so long as we have optionality and we have agility to move between markets and between channels and between customers based on the change which we're seeing, some of which will be structural, meaning it will be forever, well, for the foreseeable future. I am an optimist that if we can really push the relevance of our products, then we will continue to be very successful because consumers out there are wanting it. It's our ability to connect with them through their hearts and minds and through the supply chain. The one caveat for me is that COVID is a global problem, and we are, I think to date, we've been fortunate that we've seen China come back, we've seen the US go up, we've seen China recover potentially slower than what we expected. And I guess at some point we are expecting the US to shift again as that wall of meat that they talk about, as their processing capacity comes back online and their livestock volumes start to flow back into the market. That will happen. And the question for me is, what does that mean from a global perspective in terms of those two markets in particular, but also, you know, you've got Europe simmering away over here in the background, and you've got lots of other quite exciting markets like Japan that Pete knows well, like South Korea, other smaller Asian markets, which, you know, the global trade just has this sort of an impact. And so for me, the only concern I have is that if we were just to see several of the big markets come back at one time and not seeing that offset, I'd just be a little bit nervous. Again, I think that's a short-term problem. I think the longer-term outlook for us is very, very strong based on everything we've been saying today.
Look, thank you so much. I'm incredibly grateful to all of you. I look forward to being able to buy you each a red wine or 10 at some point. So I'll get the diary, get it in my diary, the big summit we're having at the beach houses. And look, I thank you for what you do. Thank you to all the other CEOs as well and the meat companies around New Zealand, because I know that you are all working incredibly hard in this space. And I look forward to chatting to you all again at some point. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, Julia. Show us your gumboots.
Never.
Thanks, Ben. See you.
See ya. Bye.